Kakashi vs. Pain is the most underrated fight in Naruto, right up there with Sasuke vs. Itachi and Sakura and Chiyo vs. Sasori. This isn't my favorite fight in the series, but it's definitely a solid top 5, right in front of Jiraiya vs. Pain and right behind Naruto vs. Pain. If you were to ask me what made a good Naruto fight, I would tell you it's strategy, narrative, and the badass factor. And this fight delivers on all 3 of those.
A smelly smell that smells smelly.
We get to see the classic Naruto strategy of baiting out abilities from your opponent to see what they're capable of. Of course, Kakashi being Kakashi almost instantly figures out the window in which he could strike the Diva Path. The fight gets a little more interesting when the Asura Path and the Akamichi clan show up. From that point moving forward, we get to see really good use of ninja tools, which are usually underutilized in a lot of Naruto fights. The first use we see is a smoke bomb that allows Kakashi to formulate a plan with Choza and Choji. Next, we get to see weighted chains being used in a brilliant way when Choza and Choji use the human juggernaut not only to bait out the repel from the Diva Path, but also to put the chains into the ground around him so that they can pull them around the Diva Path, halting his movement and allowing Kakashi to close the gap with the Chidori. It's really simple, but it's also really brilliant. And remember, this takes place at a time in the story where chakra pools actually mattered. If the Akamichi clan had showed up, then Kakashi would have had to use shadow clones if he wanted to do the same strategy, and then he wouldn't have had enough chakra left to be able to prevent the nail from killing him.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
I think that in a world where Kakashi never got revived, this fight would be a lot higher on a lot of people's lists. Seeing Kakashi not only fail to stop the Diva Path, but also to have the Diva Path go on to literally kill 99% of the people in the village is one of those moments that just gives you chills down your back and goosebumps on your arms. And I kind of have a personal bias for fights that don't particularly have a happy ending. My favorite fight in the whole Naruto series is Sasuke versus Itachi. But one thing I think that Kakashi vs. Pain does better is actually amplifying the narrative in the sense that it gave Naruto's defeating Pain, not only physically, but ideologically, even more weight behind it. I also really like the development we get when we see Kakashi sit down and talk with his dad after he dies. You can clearly see that Kakashi's satisfied with how he ended things, passing on the will of fire, just like the third Hokage, and just like Asuma did before him.
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
We already knew Pain was pretty powerful, but seeing him strike fear into Kakashi, of all people, definitely raised his respect meter, and all things considered, he managed to hit Kakashi at point-blank range with the rod, which is pretty impressive considering Kakashi's taijutsu levels are comparable to Might Guy, be it in his base form, but nonetheless impressive. The Diva and Asura paths managed to have the upper hand the majority of the fight until Choza and Choji showed up, and that's when the badass aspect of the fight really kicked into high gear. Kakashi's plan to take out the Diva's path is some of the best teamwork we've seen in the series, comparable to Lady Chiyo and Sakura versus Sasori, and Kakashi, Guy, and Naruto versus Obito. Another badass factor is having really strong jutsu in the Shinra Tensei and the Kamui, while still keeping the integrity of what makes a good Naruto battle, unlike the Ten Tails Obito, and to a slightly lesser extent the Ten Tails Madara fights. One thing I will say is that the length of the fight is pretty short, which is unfortunate, but everything else about it overshadows that just enough to make it better than the Jiraiya versus the Pain fight, which may just be a personal bias because I prefer Kakashi over Jiraiya, which is a similar reason as to why I think this fight is better than the Kakashi versus the Obito fight. Pain is just so much better of a character, it's actually crazy. Pain's motivation and what he actually wants to do to change things actually makes sense. He has the same goals as Naruto, he's just going about it in a bad way. It's very similar to the end of the series when Sasuke had the same goals as Naruto, he was just going to go about it in a very authoritarian type of fashion. Whereas Obito is just completely ruled and manipulated by emotion. His plan is completely selfish, and you can't say that about Pain. I like what they did with Obito up until the point we discovered that he was Obito, and then he dropped about 50 IQ points. But I digress.